Good holy everyone, how are you? Okay, very good. So for today, we will be going to discuss another topic, but before that, please allow me to introduce myself together with my co-reporters. So by the way, I'm Maria Jean A. Empinado, together with Miss Sharella May Francisco and Jocelyn Gabas. So today, our topic is all about Gestalt theory under constructivist learning theories. So now let us start. So the introduction. Definition of learning theory, conceptual framework in which knowledge is absorbed, processed, and retained during learning. Cognitive, emotional, and environmental influences, as well as the prior knowledge experience, all play a part in how understanding or a worldview is. So acquired or changed, and knowledge and skills retained. So what is a Gestalt theory? Gestalt, loosely translated, means configuration and was developed as a visual theory in the 1920s by three German psychologists. So they are Widermer, Kafka, and Kohler. So it has since been adopted by many 20th century artists to improve work visually and communicate visual messages with maximum clarity. So the German word Gestalt is roughly equivalent to the English configuration or organization and emphasizes the whole of a human experience. Over the years, the Gestalt psychologist provided demonstrations and described principles to explain the way we organize our sensations into perceptions. So later on, my co-reporter will be discussed what are these principles or lost in Gestalt. So Math Wertheimer, one of the founding fathers of Gestalt theory, observed that sometimes we interpret motion when there is no motion at all. For example, a powered sign used at a convenience store to indicate that the store is open or closed might be seen as a sign with a flashing light. However, the lights are not actually flashing. The lights have been programmed to blink rapidly at their own individual pace. Perceived as a whole, the sign flashes. Perceived individually, the lights turn off and on at the designated times. So another example of this would be a brick house. As a whole, it is viewed as a standing structure. However, it is actually composed of many smaller parts, which are individual bricks. So people tend to see things from a holistic point of view rather than breaking it. So Gestalt also explained structure configuration layout that is unified. For example, a whole web page made up of a header, footer, and sidebars. So we can observe that these elements individually too, but they all work to form a whole product. So Max Wertheimer has explained the term Gestalt as that the whole is greater than the parts. Another example is that a flower is not just a total of sepals, petals, calyx, corolla, color, honey, and fragrance, but something more than that. The total of the part is not equal to the whole. This is known as a Gestalt viewpoint. So according to the view, learning is the organization and reorganization of behavior which arises from the interaction of a maturing organism and its environment. So it is the bringing about through this interaction of the new forms of perception, imagination, motor coordination, and other organic behavior. So sudden appearance of the solution is an essential characteristic of insight learning. So now let us move on to constructivism. Whilst Gestalt theory refers to subconscious passive processes the human mind undergoes when viewing an image, constructivism explains the active role a viewer plays in reading and interpreting images. So, constructivist theories are all based on the idea that we do not perceive the world directly, that we process any image we see before it is consciously recognized. So there are many different types of constructivist. Perhaps the best known of this is the Gestalt theory, which we are discussing right now.
The law of Gestalt theory, the figure ground, proximity, closure, and continuation. First is figure or ground. It is suggested that in order to be comprehended, image and text must be visible, and that visual perception is based on contrast. We have a tendency to focus on and perceive things in the foreground first. Perceptual grouping is a critical requirement for distinguishing objects through vision. Second, proximity. Elements or objects that appear near together are thought to belong together as a group, but objects or elements that appear far away appear separate. As a result, elements that appear closer together will be perceived as a coherent object. Objects that are close together are more likely to be grouped together. Third is closure. Humans have a natural tendency to fill in. Lacking information, we fill in the gaps or close the figure we perceive by completing a contour and ignoring gaps in the figure. We were able to create a space, and objects that are gathered together are viewed as a whole. Fourth is continuation. The human's eyes proclivity to proceed along a composition in the same direction as a particular form or line. Individuals have a tendency to continue contour if the elements of the pattern establish an inferred direction, suggesting that every line or form has kinetic inertia or a defined direction in which the viewer's eye will naturally follow. People have a proclivity for drawing a straight line. So, law of Gestalt theories propose that the experience and perceptions of learners have a significant impact on the way that they learn, and also two attempts to describe how people tend to organize visual elements into groups or unified whole when certain principles are applied.
Gestalt's principle. Now, let's talk about the Gestalt's principle. Gestalt principles are different ways individual group stimuli together in order to make a whole that makes sense to them. These principles are divided into five categories: the proximity, similarity, continuity, connectedness, and closure. By perceiving the objective as well as the world around us, we reflect this Gestalt principle. First, we have the proximity. The Gestalt principle of proximity is when an individual perceives several objects that are close together as a belonging together. An example of this is this picture. In this picture, the dots are all the same color, size, and shape. The only reason that we perceive two different blocks of dots is because of their position and how close they are to each other. If these dots were the miles and miles apart, then we would not perceive them as. Next is the similarity. If proximity is due to position, then the Gestalt principle of similarity is how we perceive information together by how similar objects are. For example, if there were five dogs and a different breeds and five cats of a different breeds, then we would like then we would group them as a cats and dogs. Here, the position did not matter because we are looking at how similar objects are each together. The third Gestalt principle is continuity. Continuity is that our brains tend to see objects as conscious or smooth rather than disjoint or discontinuous. A great example of this phenomenon is a movie. Movie is just a millions of pictures put together in flip to at fast rate. Your brain brings all this disjoint picture together into a cohesive, smooth unit. Connectedness is the fourth principle of Gestalt's principle. Connectedness is when we see connection in disjoint object. One example of this is when you can see the image that will be made to connect the dots picture before you connect the dots. For example, when the people find constellation in the sky, they see a picture made up of dots. This closure is the final Gestalt principle. Closure is when individuals fill the blanks. This means that the brain sees a big picture even when the element of the picture may be missing. An example of this is the alphabet. You may not have noticed that some of the letters were missing because your brain knows that the sequence of the letter is supposed to look like, and you perceive that the missing letters were together. And that's all for our report. Thank you for listening.